Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the research vessel Endeavour, watching the stars through the main view screen. His crew had been mining asteroids for 3 months now, collecting rare metals for Earth's growing space colonies. The work was boring but important. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock. Another 12 hours until their shift ended. Lisa Rodriguez sat at the communications desk, listening to the usual chatter from nearby ships and space stations. She was good at her job and always kept one ear open for trouble. Today felt different, though the normal radio traffic seemed quieter than usual. She adjusted her headset and tried different frequencies. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice tight with worry. "I'm picking up some strange signals from the outer system." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of signals?" "They're not human," Lisa said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "The patterns are all wrong, and Captain, there are a lot of them." On the other side of the bridge, Lieutenant Ben Carter was studying the long-range sensors. His face went pale as he read the data. "Sir, you need to see this. I'm showing 50 large objects moving toward Earth at high speed." Jake felt his stomach drop. "How large?" "Each one is about 5 times bigger than our biggest warship," Ben replied. "And they're moving faster than anything we've ever built." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Jake knew what this meant. Earth had been dreading this moment for decades. First contact with aliens, and they were heading straight for humanity's homeworld. "Lisa, can you make sense of their transmissions?" Jake asked. Lisa worked frantically at her console, running the alien signals through every translation program they had. Most of it was gibberish, but slowly patterns began to emerge. Her face went white as she listened. "Captain, I think I'm getting something," she said in a shaky voice. "They're talking about us, about humans. They keep using words that translate to primitive and harvest and something that might mean slaves." Jake felt cold fear wash over him. These aliens weren't coming in peace. They were coming to conquer Earth and enslave humanity. He grabbed the emergency communicator and opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. "Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison aboard the Endeavour. We have a code red situation. Unknown alien fleet approaching Earth with hostile intent." "Repeat." "Hostile aliens inbound." The reply came back quickly from Admiral Kevin Walsh himself. "Morrison, confirm your report. How many ships?" 50 confirmed contacts, Admiral. They're big and fast, and their communications suggest they plan to enslave humanity." There was a long pause before Admiral Walsh responded. "Understood, Morrison. We're mobilizing everything we have. Get your ship out of there and head for the moon base." Jake looked around at his crew. They were scientists and miners, not soldiers. But they were also human beings, and Earth was their home. "Lisa, patch me through to the entire fleet. All ships, all stations." When the channel opened, Jake took a deep breath. "This is Captain Morrison of the Endeavour. An alien fleet is approaching Earth with hostile intentions. They vastly outnumber our defense forces. Every ship that can fight needs to head for Earth immediately. This is not a drill." Dr. Amanda Foster was working late in her lab on Luna Station when the emergency broadcast reached her. As a specialist in alien life forms, she had always wondered what humanity's first contact would be like. She had hoped for a peaceful meeting between civilizations. Instead, she was looking at fragmentary images of tall, insect-like creatures with advanced weapons. The aliens called themselves the Valdari Empire. From what Amanda could tell from the intercepted transmissions, they saw humans as nothing more than another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. The Valdari had done this before to other worlds. Earth was just their next target. Amanda studied the few clear images they had managed to capture. The Valdari were tall and thin, with 4 arms and faces that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a spider. They wore advanced armor and carried weapons that seemed to fire pure energy. Their ships bristled with defensive shields that glowed with power. Meanwhile, Admiral Walsh stood in Earth's command center, looking at displays showing humanity's fleet. 30 ships total, mostly destroyers and cruisers designed for fighting pirates and asteroids, not alien invaders. The largest was the battleship Columbia, but even she would be dwarfed by the smallest Valdari vessel. "Sir," reported his aide, Colonel Lisa Martinez, "all available ships are moving to defensive positions. Civilian vessels are being evacuated." From the outer system, Walsh nodded grimly. The math was simple and terrifying. 50 advanced alien warships against 30 human vessels that had never faced anything like this. But they would fight anyway, because that's what humans did when their backs were against the wall. The Valdari fleet continued its approach, confident and unstoppable. They had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics. Overwhelming force, advanced technology, and complete surprise. The primitive humans would surrender quickly once they saw the futility of resistance, but the Valdari had never fought humans before. They were about to learn their first lesson about Earth's children. The Valdari fleet entered the solar system like a storm of death. Their massive ships moved in perfect formation, energy shields glowing bright blue around each vessel. Commander Elena Parker watched them approach from the bridge of her destroyer, the Defiant. She had 12 ships under her command, positioned near Jupiter to buy Earth more time. "All ships, this is Parker," she broadcast to her small fleet. "We know the odds. We know what we're facing. But we're human, and humans don't give up. Fire everything you have and make them pay for every mile." The first battle began when the Valdari ships came within range. Elena's fleet opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space toward the alien vessels. Energy beams lanced out from human weapons. The display screens lit up with explosions and weapon fire. Then the human weapons hit the Valdari shields and simply bounced off. The energy blasts scattered harmlessly. The missiles exploded against invisible barriers without doing any damage. The alien shields absorbed every attack as if the human weapons were toys. "No effect, Commander," reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Gary Mills. "Their shields are too strong." The Valdari responded with casual efficiency. Beams of purple energy reached out from their ships and touched the human vessels. Where the beams hit, armor melted like butter. Ship after ship in Elena's fleet died or went silent as the alien weapons cut through their hulls. "All ships scatter and run," Elena ordered as her own ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Get word back to Earth. Tell them the weapons don't work." Only 3 ships from Elena's fleet escaped. The rest were destroyed or disabled in minutes. The Valdari hadn't even slowed down. On Earth, the news hit Admiral Walsh like a physical blow. "Complete shield immunity," he repeated as he read the battle report. "Our weapons had no effect at all." General Marcus Stone stood beside him in the command bunker deep under Colorado. Stone was in charge of ground defenses, but what defense could they mount against such technology? "How long until they reach Earth?" he asked. 18 hours, Walsh replied. "We'll make them fight for every inch, but Marcus, I don't think we can stop them." Above them, the skies began filling with Valdari landing craft. The alien ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. They were beautiful in a terrible way, sleek and graceful as they dropped toward major cities around the globe. The first landings happened simultaneously in New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow. Valdari soldiers poured out of their craft in perfect formation. They were even more frightening in person than in the intercepted images. 8 feet tall with 4 arms that moved like liquid metal. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that looked like insect heads with glowing red eyes. Staff. Sergeant Ryan Campbell was on patrol in Chicago when the aliens landed in Grant Park. He watched from a rooftop as the first Valdari soldiers emerged from their landing craft. They moved with mechanical precision, setting up some kind of barrier around their ship. Ryan raised his rifle and fired at the nearest alien. The bullet struck the creature's center mass, but bounced off harmlessly. The Valdari had personal shields. Just like their ships? The alien turned toward Ryan's position and raised its weapon. Purple energy struck the building where Ryan was hiding. The entire top floor exploded in flames. Ryan barely escaped by diving through a window into the next building. As he picked himself up from the broken glass, he realized that humanity was completely outclassed. The aliens began herding civilians into collection points. They used some kind of stunning weapon that left people conscious but unable to move. Families were separated. Children cried for parents who couldn't reach them. The Valdari treated humans like cattle. Efficient and emotionless. Dr. Patricia Miller was working in her laboratory at the University of Michigan when the aliens took control of her city. She watched from her window as Valdari soldiers marched. Groups of people down the street. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, like they were following a program. Patricia was a material scientist, and she couldn't stop thinking about those shields. They had stopped bullets, missiles, and energy weapons. But they were clearly selective. They let light through since she could see the aliens clearly. They let air through since the aliens could breathe. There had to be a frequency or a type of force that could get through. In the ruins of downtown Detroit, mechanic Tony Reeves was hiding in his garage when he witnessed something interesting. A Valdari patrol was moving down the street when a water main burst. The massive concrete pipe fell from a height of 30 feet and struck one of the aliens directly. The alien's shield flickered and died. The concrete crushed the creature instantly. Tony stared in amazement. Energy weapons couldn't hurt them. Bullets bounced off. But falling concrete had killed one instantly. What did that mean? Similar observations were being made around the world. In London, a Valdari soldier was killed when a building collapsed on top of it during a bombing run. In Tokyo, another alien died when it was caught under a falling truck during an accident. The pattern was becoming clear to those who survived long enough to notice. The Valdari shields worked perfectly against directed energy and high velocity projectiles. But they seemed to have trouble with large, slow-moving mass. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks was organizing resistance fighters in the subway tunnels under New York. He had been a combat engineer before the invasion, and his mind was working overtime trying to find weaknesses in the alien technology. "Listen up," he told his group of survivors. "These things aren't invincible. Their shields have limits. We just need to figure out what those limits are." Above ground, the Valdari continued their systematic conquest of Earth. Processing centers were being built to sort humans for different types of work. The aliens seemed to have done this many times before. They knew exactly how to break the spirit of a conquered species, but they had never conquered humans before. In hidden bunkers and ruined buildings around the world, people were watching, learning, and planning. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something else. They had the ability to adapt, to find new solutions when old ones failed. Captain Julie Henderson was aboard one of the few surviving human ships in orbit. The Guardian had escaped destruction by hiding in Earth's shadow, using the planet itself as a shield. She watched the alien fleet through her periscope and wondered if there was any way to strike back. The aliens seemed so confident, so sure of their victory. Maybe that confidence would be their weakness. Humans had been underestimated before, by enemies who thought they were superior. Those enemies had learned too late that humans were full of surprises. Dr. Patricia Miller worked by candlelight in the basement of her destroyed laboratory. The power had been cut off for 3 days, but she refused to give up her research. Beside her, engineer Tony Reeves helped sort through pieces of Valdari equipment they had scavenged from the wreckage above. "Look at this," Patricia said, holding up a piece of alien armor. "The metal is incredibly advanced, but the design is purely focused on energy deflection. See these patterns? They're specifically made to scatter heat and radiation." Tony nodded as he examined a broken Valdari weapon. "Same thing here. This firing mechanism is designed to channel pure energy with perfect efficiency. But there's no protection against physical impact on the power cell housing." They had been collecting alien equipment for days, ever since Tony witnessed the concrete pipe incident. Every piece told the same story. The Valdari had focused completely on energy-based technology and defenses. They seemed to have forgotten about simpler, more primitive approaches. "It's like they evolved past certain types of warfare," Patricia observed. "Their shields stop our lasers and plasma weapons perfectly, but they barely react to physical objects moving at low speeds. Tony picked up a crowbar from his tool collection. So if I walked up to one of these things and hit it with this, the shield might not even activate, Patricia finished. It's designed to stop energy weapons and high-speed projectiles. A slow-moving metal bar might pass right through. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks was testing this theory in the subway tunnels. He had fashioned a crossbow from scrap metal and was loading it with sharpened steel bolts. The weapon was ancient by modern standards, but that might be exactly what they needed. His team had captured a lone Valdari soldier during a patrol. The alien was secured in an abandoned maintenance room, its weapons removed. Danny raised the crossbow and took careful aim. The steel bolt flew through the air at about 200 feet per second. It passed through the alien's energy shield like the shield wasn't even there. The bolt struck the creature in the chest, punching through its armor and killing it instantly. "Well, I'll be damned," whispered Sergeant Lisa Chun, who had been watching. From the doorway, "A medieval weapon just killed a space alien." The word spread quickly through the resistance networks. Crossbows worked, thrown knives worked. Anything moving slow enough didn't trigger the shields. The Valdari had made themselves vulnerable to humanity's oldest weapons. "Captain, Julie Henderson received the message while hiding her ship behind the moon. The Guardian's communications officer had been monitoring resistance transmissions from Earth." The news was almost too good to believe. "Confirmed reports that primitive kinetic weapons are effective against Valdari personal shields," a communications officer reported. "Crossbow bolts, thrown spears, even rocks appear to penetrate their defenses." Julie stared at the tactical display showing the alien fleet in Earth orbit. Their ships would have the same shield technology as their soldiers. If small kinetic weapons could penetrate personal shields, maybe larger kinetic weapons could damage their ships. "Helm, plot a course using only chemical thrusters," she ordered. "No quantum drive, no energy signatures they might recognize." "We're going to test a theory." The Guardian drifted toward the alien fleet using momentum and tiny course corrections from old-fashioned rocket engines. To the Valdari sensors, the ship would look like space debris, not worthy of attention. On Earth's surface, the resistance was growing bolder. In the ruins of Detroit, blacksmith Carl Wagner had set up a forge in an abandoned auto plant. He was working around the clock, turning scrap steel into crossbow bolts, spear points, and arrowheads. "Never thought my hobby would save the world," Carl muttered as he hammered red-hot metal into shape. Before the invasion, he had been a weekend warrior who enjoyed medieval reenactment. Now his old-fashioned skills were humanity's best hope. Similar scenes were playing out across the globe. In rural Montana, ranch hand Katie Sullivan was teaching resistance fighters how to use hunting bows. In Scotland, historian Robert MacLeod was showing survivors how to build medieval siege weapons from modern materials. The Valdari began to notice the change when their patrols started disappearing. A squad would enter a building to collect humans and simply never come out. Search parties would find their bodies pierced by crude arrows or crude spears. Overlord Zaxton studied the reports from his command ship with growing confusion. His soldiers were dying, but not from any weapons his scanners could detect. The primitive humans seemed to be using technology even more backward than their usual equipment. "Impossible," he clicked in his native language. "These creatures cannot harm our shielded warriors with sticks and stones." But the evidence kept mounting. A patrol eliminated by thrown rocks. Another squad killed by humans wielding sharpened metal bars. His forces were being picked apart by weapons that predated spaceflight by thousands of years, in orbit around Earth. Captain Henderson brought the Guardian within striking distance of a Valdari cruiser. Her ship was loaded with everything they had been able to improvise. Steel pipes filled with explosives. Containers of ball bearings that could be fired like giant shotgun shells. Even a cargo bay full of concrete blocks. "Range to target 2,000 meters in closing," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Pete Harrison. "They still haven't noticed us." "Fire kinetic package 1. Henderson ordered. A steel cylinder packed with explosives launched from the Guardian's improvised weapon system. It moved slowly compared to modern weapons, traveling at only a few hundred meters per second. The Valdari Cruiser's sensors detected the incoming object, but classified it as debris. The cylinder struck the alien ship's hull and exploded. The shields that could stop energy weapons and high-speed missiles were useless against a slow-moving chunk of metal. The explosion tore a hole in the cruiser's side, venting atmosphere and debris into space. "Direct hit," Harrison reported with amazement. "Their shields didn't even try to stop it." On the surface, Major Susan Clark was preparing for the largest resistance operation yet attempted. She had gathered 200 volunteers armed with crossbows, compound bows, and even a few reconstructed catapults. Their target was the main Valdari processing center in Denver. "Remember," she told her fighters, "move slow and stay low. Their sensors are looking for energy signatures and fast movement. We're going to hit them like our ancestors hit enemy." Castles. The attack began at dawn. Resistance fighters emerged from sewers, basements, and ruined buildings. They moved carefully, using terrain and debris for cover. The Valdari sensors, calibrated to detect advanced weapons and vehicles, completely missed the approaching humans. Crossbow bolts began raining down on the alien guards. The Valdari tried to return fire with their energy weapons, but the humans had learned to use cover effectively. For every resistance fighter killed, 3 aliens died. The processing center's defensive systems were designed to stop missiles and energy attacks. They were helpless against a medieval-style siege. Catapults hurled rocks and improvised explosives over the walls. Humans with spears and swords charged through breach sections like ancient warriors. Within 2 hours, the entire facility was in human hands. 300 civilians were freed, and dozens of Valdari soldiers lay dead. The aliens had been defeated by tactics that were old when Earth was young. Word of the victory spread across the resistance networks. Humans around the world began to hope for the first time since the invasion began. The aliens could be beaten. Their superior technology meant nothing against humanity's oldest weapons and tactics. The tide of war was beginning to turn. Colonel Nathan Price stood on the roof of what used to be the Pentagon, looking out over a world transformed by war. 3 weeks had passed since the Denver victory, and everything had changed. Across the globe, humans were rising up with weapons. Their ancestors would have recognized the resistance network had grown into something resembling an army. Blacksmith shops operated in every major city, turning out crossbow bolts and spear points by the thousands. Chemistry students had become bomb makers, mixing explosives from household chemicals. History professors taught siege warfare to former office workers. "Sir," reported his aide, Captain Jenny Walsh, "we're getting reports from every continent. The aliens are pulling back from urban areas. Their casualties are becoming unsustainable." Nathan smiled grimly. They expected to fight a modern army with modern weapons. Instead, they're facing 10,000 years of human military evolution all at once. In the ruins of Tokyo, former businessman turned resistance leader Hiro Tanaka was leading a cavalry charge. Yes, an actual cavalry charge with horses and riders wielding lances like medieval knights. The Valdari had never encountered mounted warfare, and their tactical computers had no response protocols for it. The alien patrol turned their energy weapons toward the approaching horses, but the riders had learned to zigzag and use smokescreens. Half the Valdari shots missed completely. The other half struck the horses' crude armor, plates of steel that dispersed the energy enough to let the animals survive. 20 riders struck the alien formation at full gallop. Lances punched through personal shields and armor alike. The Valdari tried to fight back, but they had been trained for long-range combat with energy weapons. Close-quarters combat with primitive weapons was something their instructors had never covered. Within minutes, the entire alien patrol was dead. The humans had lost 3 horses and suffered 2 wounded riders. By any measure of military efficiency, it should have been impossible. Major Susan Clark had become something of a legend in the resistance movement. Her capture of the Denver processing center had been replicated dozens of times around the world. Now, she was planning something even more ambitious. "We're going to take back Chicago," she announced to her assembled commanders. "The aliens have their main North American headquarters there. If we can capture it, We can free 50,000 civilians and deal a major blow to their command structure. Her army was unlike anything seen in modern warfare. Crossbow specialists worked alongside demolition experts. Cavalry units coordinated with teams carrying medieval siege ladders. Chemical warfare specialists mixed their compounds in the same workshops where blacksmiths forged arrowheads. The attack on Chicago began with a bombardment that would have made ancient warriors proud. Catapults and trebuchets hurled stones and explosives into the alien compound. The Valdari defensive systems, designed to intercept missiles and energy blasts, had no programming for dealing with rocks flying through the air at 30 miles per hour. Captain Frank Mitchell was leading a special mission in Earth orbit. His small squadron of ships had been retrofitted with weapons that NASA engineers called kinetic bombardment systems, but everyone else called space shotguns. They were essentially enormous cannons that fired clouds of metal pellets at relatively low velocities. "Target the alien flagship," Mitchell ordered as his squadron approached the Valdari fleet. "Multiple spread, maximum dispersion." 6 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Thousands of steel balls flew toward the massive alien command vessel. Each pellet was only moving at 500 meters per second, too slow to trigger the ship's defensive systems. The metal storm struck the Valdari flagship like a giant handful of gravel thrown at a window. Individual pellets might not have done much damage, but thousands of them striking simultaneously was devastating. The alien ship's hull was peppered with holes. Atmosphere began venting from dozens of breaches. On the planet's surface, Professor Carol Adams was putting her chemistry knowledge to deadly use. She had developed a compound that specifically attacked the materials used in Valdari equipment. When mixed with ordinary gasoline and stuffed into bottles, it created weapons that could melt alien armor on contact. "The key is understanding their metallurgy," she explained to a group of resistance fighters learning to make her chemical bombs. "Their alloys are incredibly strong against energy attacks, but they have specific vulnerabilities to certain acids and bases." Her cocktails were being mass-produced in hidden laboratories across the world. Combined with traditional firebombs and flamethrowers, they gave human fighters an edge in close combat that the aliens couldn't counter. The Valdari command structure was beginning to crack under the pressure. Overlord Zaxxon found himself fighting an enemy that used tactics older than his civilization. His forces were trained to fight other advanced species with predictable weapons and strategies. Humans used whatever worked, regardless of how primitive it appeared. "How can they coordinate these attacks without quantum communications?" he demanded of his tactical advisors. "They use nothing but primitive radio, and yet their timing is perfect across multiple continents." His subordinates had no answer. Human coordination methods were so basic that Valdari intelligence couldn't track them. Resistance cells communicated using techniques that were thousands of years old but still effective. Civilian engineer Pete Jackson had become an expert at destroying alien technology using nothing more than hand tools and determination. His specialty was sabotage missions that required getting close to Valdari equipment and simply smashing it with hammers and crowbars. "The thing about really advanced technology," he explained to his sabotage teams, "is that it's usually pretty delicate. Hit it hard enough with something heavy, and it breaks just like anything else." Pete's teams had destroyed dozens of Valdari communication arrays, power generators, and sensor stations. The aliens kept trying to protect their equipment with energy shields, but a man with a sledgehammer could walk right through those shields and reduce million credit. Technology to scrap metal. The global uprising reached its peak when Admiral Rebecca Torres assembled the largest human fleet since the war began. Her ships were a motley collection of retrofitted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and construction craft. None of them looked like warships, but all of them carried primitive kinetic weapons. "Today we take back our sky," she broadcast to the fleet as they approached the main Valdari armada. "These aliens thought they could enslave humanity because we don't have their fancy technology. They're about to learn that humans don't need fancy technology to win a fight." The battle that followed was unlike anything in military history. Human ships fired everything from steel pipes to actual cannonballs at the alien fleet. The Valdari returned fire with devastating energy weapons, but they couldn't hit what their sensors couldn't properly detect. Ship after ship in the alien fleet found itself under attack by weapons that shouldn't have been able to hurt them. Cargo containers full of concrete crashed through their hulls. Clouds of metal fragments shredded their sensor arrays. Ancient explosive charges, moving too slowly to trigger point defenses, blew massive holes in their armor. The Valdari began to retreat. For the first time since their arrival, they were losing a major engagement. Their technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. Down on Earth's surface, the tide of battle was turning everywhere at once. Valdari forces were pulling back from major cities. Processing centers were being overrun by humans wielding swords and riding horses. The mighty alien empire was being driven back by cavemen with crossbows, but the war was far from over. The Valdari still had superior numbers and devastating weapons. The question was whether human ingenuity and determination would be enough to win final victory against such overwhelming odds. Overlord Zaxton stared at the tactical displays in his command chamber with growing rage and disbelief. Half his invasion fleet was damaged or destroyed. His ground forces were retreating from every major population center. The primitive humans had somehow turned their technological disadvantage into a strength. "This is impossible," he clicked angrily to his subordinates. "We have conquered 47 worlds using these same tactics. No primitive species has ever offered effective resistance." Fleet Commander Yaxtil approached cautiously. "Overlord, these humans do not fight like other primitives. They adapt their tactics faster than our computers can calculate responses. When we counter one approach, they immediately switch to another." Zaxton sends. Compound eyes blazed with fury. If he could not conquer these stubborn creatures with conventional tactics, he would break their will to resist. Begin systematic destruction of their population centers. Reduce their cities to ash. They will surrender when they see the futility of their resistance. The order went out to the remaining Valdari fleet. Energy weapons that had previously been used for surgical strikes now began targeting civilian areas. New York's skyline disappeared in columns of purple fire. London's ancient architecture melted under concentrated beam attacks. The aliens were escalating from invasion to genocide. Captain Frank Mitchell received the emergency broadcasts. While his damaged ship limped back to Earth, the Valdari had changed tactics and were now trying to terrorize humanity into submission. Frank looked at his crew and made a decision that would have been called suicidal under normal circumstances. "Plot a course for the Valdari command ship," he ordered. "Full ramming speed?" His navigator, Lieutenant Dave Cooper, stared at him in shock. "Sir, that's a suicide mission. We'll never survive the impact." Frank nodded grimly. "Maybe not. But we've got 6 nuclear warheads in our torpedo bay and no way to get them through. They're shields with conventional delivery methods. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The plan was insane by modern military standards, but perfectly logical by human ones. If you can't shoot your enemy from a distance, you get close and hit them with everything you have. Frank's ship accelerated toward the massive Valdari flagship, using its engines to build up as much kinetic energy as possible. The alien point defense systems tried to stop the approaching human vessel, but their targeting computers were calibrated for high-speed missiles, not a large ship moving at relatively moderate velocity. Energy beams struck the ship's armored hull but failed to stop its momentum. Frank's ship struck the Valdari flagship at over 2,000 kilometers per hour. The impact drove the human vessel deep into the alien ship's hull, breaching multiple compartments. In the moment before his ship was destroyed, Frank triggered the nuclear warheads. The explosion tore the heart out of the Valdari command ship. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as power systems overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. Within minutes, the flagship that had seemed invincible was breaking apart and falling toward Earth's atmosphere on the planet's surface. Professor Carol Adams was working on her most ambitious project yet. She had developed a compound that specifically attacked the filtration systems in Valdari breathing apparatus. When dispersed as an aerosol, it would force the aliens to remove their helmets or suffocate. "The beauty of this approach," she explained to the resistance leaders gathered in her hidden laboratory, "is that it doesn't try to penetrate their shields or armor. It simply makes the air around them toxic to their biology but harmless to humans." Her chemical weapon was being mass-produced in secret facilities across the globe. Crop-dusting planes, municipal water trucks, and even perfume sprayers had been converted to distribute the compound. The aliens would soon discover that their technological superiority couldn't protect them from the air they breathed. Civilian engineer Pete Jackson was leading his most daring sabotage mission yet. His target was the main Valdari communication array in orbit, a massive structure that coordinated all alien military operations on Earth. Getting to it required stealing a Valdari shuttle and flying it directly to the array. "Remember," he told his team of volunteer engineers, "we're not trying to be fancy. Once we're inside, we find the most important-looking equipment and hit it with hammers until it stops working." The plan worked with typical human improvisation. The stolen shuttle's identification codes got them past the outer defenses. Once inside the array, Pete's team spread out through the facility with crowbars, sledgehammers, and portable cutting torches. Within an hour, they had reduced millions of credits worth of advanced communication equipment to twisted scrap metal. The Valdari forces on Earth found themselves cut off from their command structure, unable to coordinate their operations or call for reinforcements. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as the alien forces lost coordination. Without central command, individual Valdari units began making tactical errors. They found themselves outnumbered and surrounded by human forces who knew the terrain intimately. Major Susan Clark led the largest coordinated attack of the war against the main Valdari stronghold in North America. Her army was a mixture of regular military units, civilian militia, and improvised cavalry that would have looked at home in any medieval battle. "Today we end this," she announced to her assembled forces. "These aliens think they can terrorize U.S. into submission by destroying our cities. They're about to learn that you can't break the human spirit with fear." The assault began with a bombardment from trebuchets and catapults that hurled everything from explosive charges to containers of Professor Adams' chemical weapons. The Valdari defensive systems, still calibrated for high-tech warfare, were helpless against the low-tech barrage. Human forces charged across the battlefield using tactics that combined ancient and modern approaches. Cavalry units rode alongside armored vehicles. Archers provided covering fire for soldiers with assault rifles. Medieval siege towers advanced next to modern tanks. The aliens fought back with devastating energy weapons, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer variety of threats they faced. Their tactical computers couldn't process the mixture of Stone Age and Space Age warfare that humanity was throwing at them. In orbit, Admiral Rebecca Torres was preparing for the final space battle of the war. The Valdari fleet had been reduced to a dozen vessels, but they were still formidable opponents. Her human fleet outnumbered them 3-1. But most of her ships were improvised weapons platforms that could barely survive one direct hit. "All ships, this is Torres," she broadcast to the fleet. "We've come this far by refusing to fight." The final battle took place both in the vacuum of space and in the streets of Earth cities simultaneously. Admiral Rebecca Torres led her improvised fleet in a desperate assault on the remaining Valdari vessels, while ground forces around the world launched coordinated attacks on the last alien strongholds. Admiral Morrison, having survived the initial disasters, now commanded a fleet that looked nothing like any navy in human history. Converted mining ships flew alongside garbage haulers and cargo vessels. Each ship carried weapons that would have been familiar to warriors from 1,000 years ago, scaled up for space combat. "Remember," Morrison broadcast to his captains, "we're not trying to out-technology them. We're going to out-think them, out-adapt them, and out-stubborn them. Use everything they don't expect." The space battle began when Morrison's fleet emerged from behind Earth's moon. The Valdari ships immediately opened fire with their energy weapons, expecting another conventional engagement. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that refused to follow any known rules of warfare. Human ships launched everything from steel cables to actual fishing nets. Cargo containers filled with concrete blocks flew through space at velocities too low to trigger alien point defenses. Mining vessels used their industrial equipment to literally grab Valdari ships and hold them in place while other human vessels rammed them on Earth's surface. General Victoria Barnes was coordinating the final ground assault. Her army was the strangest military force in human history. Medieval knights rode alongside modern tanks. Archers provided covering fire for soldiers with machine guns. Siege engines advanced next to missile launchers, the largest remaining. Valdari installation was their main command center in what used to be Berlin. The facility was protected by the most advanced defensive systems the aliens possessed. Energy, barriers, automated weapon systems, and shield generators that could deflect any known human weapon, but the humans weren't using known weapons anymore. They were using everything their ancestors had ever invented, combined in ways no military computer could predict. The assault began with a bombardment that spanned 10,000 years of human military technology. Catapults hurled explosive charges while artillery fired conventional shells. Archers shot incendiary arrows while snipers targeted alien officers with high-powered rifles. The Valdari defensive systems tried to respond, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer variety of threats. Energy barriers designed to stop plasma weapons were useless against thrown rocks. Automated guns calibrated for high-speed targets couldn't track arrows flying at medieval velocities. In the midst of the chaos, maintenance worker Gary Thompson was making his way toward the heart of the alien facility. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He was just a man with a wrench and a lifetime of experience fixing things that were broken. Gary had noticed something about Valdari technology during his months in the Resistance. For all its sophistication, it was surprisingly fragile when subjected to the kind of abuse that human equipment was built to withstand. Hit it hard enough in the right place, and even the most advanced alien device would simply stop working. He found the main computer core exactly where the intelligence reports had said it would be. The device was a marvel of alien engineering, a crystalline structure that pulsed with energy and coordinated the entire Valdari military operation on Earth. Gary looked at it for a moment, then raised his wrench and hit it as hard as he could. The crystal cracked. Lights began flickering throughout the facility. Gary hit it again and again, until the entire structure collapsed into sparking fragments. Across Earth and in orbit around the planet, Valdari systems began shutting down. Ships lost power and drifted helplessly. Ground installations went dark. The alien invasion force, which had seemed so unstoppable just months ago, suddenly found itself blind, deaf, and unable to coordinate. Overlord Zaxton stood in his damaged command ship, watching his empire's greatest military disaster unfold on the tactical displays. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that predated spaceflight. His ground forces were being overrun by humans wielding swords and riding animals. How is this possible? He demanded of his remaining officers. They have no advanced technology, no energy weapons, no quantum computers. How can they defeat us? The fleet commander Yaxtel, nursing wounds from a piece of flying debris that had somehow penetrated the ship's defenses, provided the answer. They fight with everything they have ever learned. When their modern weapons failed, they used ancient ones. When their computers were outmatched, they relied on intuition. They adapt faster than we can respond. The Valdari command ship shuddered as another human vessel rammed into it. This time it was a converted luxury yacht carrying a cargo hold full of industrial explosives. The blast tore through multiple decks and sent the massive alien vessel spinning out of control. Zaxton made the hardest decision of his military career. Signal retreat to all remaining units. We withdraw from this system immediately. But even retreat was complicated by human tactics. The surviving Valdari ships found their escape routes blocked by human vessels willing to sacrifice themselves to prevent alien withdrawal. Cargo ships rammed fleeing cruisers. Mining vessels used their equipment to physically grab alien ships and hold them in place. On the planet below, the last Valdari ground forces were surrendering or dying. General Barnes accepted the surrender of the alien commander in Berlin while similar scenes played out around the world. The invasion was over. Humanity had won. The victory celebration was muted by the enormous cost of the war. Entire cities lay in ruins. Millions of people had died fighting an enemy with vastly superior technology. But they had proven something important about the human species. Captain Julie Henderson, her ship battered but still flying, received the final surrender transmission from the Valdari fleet. The message was brief and bitter, transmitted in broken English that the alien survivors had learned during their occupation. "You fight like primitives," the message said. "But you are not primitive. You are unpredictable. You use whatever works, no matter how crude. We came expecting to face an advanced civilization with logical responses. Instead, we found creatures who will grab a rock if their energy weapon fails." The transmission continued, carrying a warning that would be heard across the galaxy. "We underestimated you. Others should not make the same mistake. You are dangerous not because of your technology, but because you refuse to be limited by it." As the last Valdari ships disappeared into hyperspace, humanity began the long process of rebuilding. But they rebuilt with a new understanding of their place in the universe. They were not the most technologically advanced species, but they possessed something more valuable than advanced technology. They had the ability to adapt, to improvise, and to never give up no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. They had learned that sometimes the best solution to a complex problem was the simplest one. And they had proven that human determination, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat could overcome any obstacle the galaxy had been put on. Notice, humanity was not to be underestimated. They had come for Earth expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they had found something far more dangerous. They had found humans who refused to stay beaten, no matter what the odds. The Valdari Empire would carry the scars of their defeat for generations. And across the galaxy, other species would hear the story of the primitive world that had broken an advanced military force using nothing but determination and 10,000 years of accumulated human ingenuity. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, but any species that wanted to threaten humanity would have to be prepared for a fight, unlike anything they had ever experienced before.